In a quiet corner of Ibanda, Uganda, Amahle stood still, her heart breaking in slow motion. Her husband, Kato, looked at her with cold eyes and said, "You're not the woman I married. You've aged. You've lost your glow." His words cut deeper than a knife. That night, he didn't come home. Amahle sat alone, staring at the door, hoping he'd return. But he didn't. 3 days later, her world shattered again. Photos flooded Facebook. There he was, smiling beside a young woman in a shiny golden dress. His new bride was just 22. Friends tagged her. People whispered. Her phone buzzed non-stop, not with comfort, but with gossip. The man she once cooked for, prayed for, and loved without question had left her without a goodbye. Amahle didn't cry in front of anyone, but inside, it felt like something inside her had died. The silence in her home was loud. The photos felt like a slap. Everyone saw them. Everyone knew. But no one saw her pain. No one heard the sound of her breaking. And yet, Amahle didn't fall apart. Not yet. She just stood there, in the quiet, holding pieces of her heart like glass. Amahle didn't shout. She didn't throw things or beg him to come back. She didn't even ask why. After the wedding photos went viral, she stayed quiet. But deep inside, her heart was heavy. The pain didn't go away, so she picked up a pencil one afternoon and started drawing. At first, it was just lines. Then, it became a face, then another, and another. She wasn't drawing pretty, perfect women. She drew real women. Tired eyes, wrinkled skin, scars, stretch marks, grey hair, frowns, smiles that looked like they had stories. These faces looked like her neighbours, like women who had been hurt but were still standing. Amahle sat under a small tree in her dusty compound every day, sketching on old paper. She had no expensive tools, just pencils, charcoal, and paint she mixed herself. But there was something powerful in her hands. Her pain turned into colour. Her silence turned into stories. One neighbour saw the drawings and asked, "Can I hang this in my shop?" A week later, a customer took a photo and shared it online. Soon, more people started sharing. They said, "This art speaks." Some said, "She paints pain like royalty." Amahle's name spread quickly through Ibanda. People came to her small home just to watch her paint. Some cried when they looked at her art. One woman said, "I've never felt beautiful before, until I saw your painting." Amahle smiled. She didn't say much. She just kept painting. She painted in the morning, in the heat of the day, and sometimes even by candlelight at night. She painted women holding babies, women crying, women laughing, women praying. She painted freedom, sadness, strength, and silence. Each face told a story that words couldn't. Slowly, Amahle felt something change inside her. Not everything hurt the same anymore. The same hands that once cooked for Kato were now creating something that made people feel seen, loved, and understood. She didn't do it for fame. She did it to survive, to heal. But her healing was so honest, so raw, that it started healing others too. Even schoolgirls in Ibanda would stop by and say, "I want to be like you." Amahle would laugh gently and say, "Be better." Her house became more than a home. It became a quiet studio where pain met peace. She didn't have a fancy sign or a big gate, just her name, softly spoken between neighbours, passed from voice to voice, heart to heart. And in that little dusty place, where one woman had been left behind, something beautiful was growing. Not loud, not perfect, but real. So real that it could not be ignored. One quiet morning, Amahle was sitting outside, painting as usual. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, as she brought another woman's story to life on paper. She didn't know that far away, in Nigeria, a popular blogger had just found her Instagram. That blogger had been looking for African art that felt real, something raw, something true. And when she saw Amahle's work, she stopped scrolling. The wrinkles, the scars, the eyes that looked like they had cried and survived. It all felt powerful. She shared Amahle's page with a simple caption, "This is what real beauty looks like." That post went viral. Within hours, Amahle's followers grew by thousands. Within days, her inbox was full of messages from Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, even Paris. People wanted her art. They wanted her vision. They wanted the truth she was brave enough to paint. Someone asked to buy a small piece for $200. Then another offered $500. Then came a fashion brand from France asking for a custom painting for their store wall. And they were willing to pay thousands. Amahle couldn't believe it. The same hands that once cleaned floors, cooked meals, and wiped away tears were now making art that people around the world were paying for. She didn't even have a proper gallery. She still painted in the same small dusty yard, sitting on a plastic chair with her paper held down by stones when the wind blew. But now, delivery drivers came often. Packages left her house every week, each one carrying her heart inside. Newspapers in Uganda wrote about her. Then came radio interviews. Everyone wanted to know, who was this woman who turned pain into power, silence into stories? Amahle stayed humble. She still wore the same simple dresses. She still walked to the market, like always. But now, people stopped her to say, "Your art changed me." Young girls took selfies with her. Mothers brought their daughters to meet her. One woman cried and said, "I thought I was ugly until I saw your paintings. Now I know I'm just human." Amahle smiled gently and said, "We are all art. We just forget to see it." She remembered the day Kato told her she had lost her glow. Now, strangers around the world were saying, "Your glow is what makes your art so beautiful." She didn't need his approval anymore. The world had given her something better, respect, not for her looks, but for her truth, her voice, her story, her hands. And Amahle kept painting, not to prove anything, but because it was her gift. She knew now that the same heart that was broken could also become a light, and it was shining far beyond Ibanda, across oceans, into hearts she would never meet. At first, Kato's new life looked perfect. He posted pictures of fancy dinners, smiling selfies with his young wife, and weekend getaways. His Facebook was full of likes, comments, and heart emojis. People called them the golden couple. But behind the pretty pictures, the truth was breaking through. It started with whispers, small rumors that something wasn't right. Then one day, a video surfaced online. It showed Kato and his new wife arguing loudly in a restaurant. Plates were pushed, voices were raised. People filmed it with their phones. It was messy. A few days later, another video went live, this time from the wife herself. She was crying, screaming into her phone. Her voice shook with anger as she shouted, "You married me to hurt her, not to love me." That video spread like wildfire. People shared it. Some were shocked. Others said, "We knew it wouldn't last." Kato stayed silent, hoping the drama would pass, but it didn't. More stories came out. Stories about cheating, about money fights, about his wife storming out of events. Brands that once supported Kato started cutting ties. Followers unfollowed. His phone, once full of praise, was now quiet. The man who left Amahle, thinking he had traded up, now had nothing stable to hold on to. His new wife started speaking more in public. She went live again and said, "He treated me like a weapon, not a woman." She talked about how he kept comparing her to Amahle, how he tried to control her, how he never really loved her, just used her. Her pain was loud, raw, and unfiltered. Kato had no reply. Every time he tried to explain himself, it only made things worse. People said he broke a queen for a temporary crown. Even his own friends began to distance themselves. Invitations stopped coming. He walked into rooms and felt eyes on him, not with respect, but with judgment. The same people who cheered when he married a younger woman now stayed silent. Some even reached out to Amahle, apologizing, saying they never saw her true worth before. Kato started deleting photos, first the wedding ones, then the couple selfies. Slowly, his social media began to empty. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots stayed, videos were saved. His perfect life was now a story of regret and broken lies. The glow he once chased had turned into shadows. Meanwhile, Amahle's name kept rising. Her art was being shown in bigger galleries. More people were sharing her work, calling her the woman who turned pain into power. Kato saw the posts. He watched her interviews. He read the comments under her pictures, all filled with love and admiration. He remembered the day he told her she had lost her glow. Now the whole world was celebrating her light. Late at night, he would scroll through her page, watching in silence. No words, just a heavy heart. The woman he had walked away from was now being called an icon, a voice for women, a symbol of strength. And his new world? It was falling apart one scandal at a time. The mask he wore, of success, of happiness, of control, had cracked. Now everyone could see what was really behind it. A man who mistook a treasure for trash and learned too late that beauty isn't in youth or filters. It's in truth, in grace, and in fire that never dies. The sun had barely risen over Kampala, but the streets near the city's art centre were already buzzing. People lined up early, dressed in bright colours, some holding flowers, others carrying cameras. They had all come for one reason: to see the art of a woman who had quietly captured the heart of a continent. Posters of Amahal's face were everywhere, next to the name of her first official gallery show, Broken Isn't Ugly. The name alone touched people. It made them curious, made them feel seen. Some had travelled from other cities, others flew in from different countries. Journalists, celebrities, students, mothers, fathers, they were all there. Inside, the gallery was filled with her paintings. Bold, honest, breathtaking. Faces of women lined every wall, some crying, some laughing, all full of strength. Each painting held a story, and people moved slowly through the space, whispering softly, pausing in front of each piece like they were in church. There was a kind of stillness in the room, not silence, but respect. Many stood in front of the paintings with tears in their eyes. Some hugged each other, some took selfies, but most just stared in awe. One woman said to her friend, "She painted my soul, and we've never even met." Later that evening, it was time for Amale to speak. A stage was set up in the centre of the gallery. Soft lights glowed above her as she walked up the steps. She wore a simple long dress, her hair grey and tied back, her hands steady. The room went quiet. Then slowly, people began to clap. The claps grew louder, turning into a full standing ovation. Amahal stood there, calm and radiant, her eyes filled with something deep, not pride, but peace. She waited for the room to quiet again. Then she began to speak. Her voice was gentle, but clear. She didn't talk much about the past. She didn't name names. She talked about healing, about how silence is not weakness, and how pain can grow into power when we stop hiding it. "I paint because I survived," she said, "and now I want other women to see themselves, not as broken, but as beautiful in every scar." In the front row, someone had slipped in quietly. He wore a black shirt, sat low in his seat, trying not to be noticed. It was Kato. He had come alone, without telling anyone. He watched her on stage, his eyes wide, frozen. The woman he once told had lost her glow now stood in front of a full house, shining like a sunrise. He saw how the crowd adored her. He saw the strength in her shoulders, the calm in her voice. He saw what he had once ignored, her beauty, her fire, her grace. He didn't clap at first. His hands stayed still on his lap, but the crowd around him rose again. Another round of applause shaking the room. Cameras flashed. People cheered. He sat there, surrounded by love that wasn't his to claim. It wasn't his moment anymore. It never was. Backstage, after the speech, Amahal stood with close friends, smiling gently. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from fans, art buyers, even museum curators. Then someone whispered, "Amahle, there's someone who wants to say hello." She turned and saw him. Kato stood awkwardly at the edge of the room, looking smaller than she remembered. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes unsure. He walked toward her slowly, like a man carrying too many regrets. When he got close, he tried to smile, but his voice shook as he said, "You look beautiful." There was silence for a second. Amali looked at him, not with anger, not with hate, but with calm strength. She leaned in, just enough for him to hear her, and said, "You had to leave for the world to see it." Then she smiled, turned away, and walked back into the room. where hundreds waited to celebrate her. The cameras caught her walking back on stage, flowers in hand, surrounded by people chanting her name. But no one noticed Kato quietly leaving through the side door. He didn't belong in that space anymore. That was her world now, not one of pain and silence, but of power and truth. That night, the city didn't sleep. Photos of Amal's show filled the internet. People shared their favorite paintings, quoted her words, wrote long posts about how her story gave them courage. #broken isn't ugly began trending across Africa. Girls in schools made drawings inspired by her. Women shared their own stories for the first time. Amarle's art didn't just hang on walls, it opened hearts, started conversations, and reminded people that beauty lives in every line, every scar, every comeback. And so, the girl who was once left behind, forgotten and heartbroken, had become the voice of thousands. Not loud, not flashy, just real. Amarle had turned her wounds into windows, and the whole world was now looking in, not with pity, but with admiration. After the show ended, the crowd was still buzzing. People were taking pictures, hugging, and talking about how Amarle's art had touched their hearts. Backstage, she stood quietly, her hands still holding a bouquet of flowers. Her heart was full but calm. She didn't need attention anymore. She had already found her power. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw him. Kato. He walked toward her slowly, like a man carrying a heavy weight. His eyes were unsure, his steps nervous. When he finally stood in front of her, there was a long silence. He looked at her, taking in the woman he once left behind. She looked different now, not just older, but stronger, softer in some ways, but unshakable. His voice broke as he spoke, barely above a whisper. "You look beautiful." He couldn't say more. Maybe he had practiced 100 words, but none came out. She didn't flinch. She didn't frown. She just leaned a little closer, smiled gently, and whispered, "You had to leave for the world to see it." And then, without another word, she turned and walked away, tall, peaceful, and glowing from within. She wasn't the same woman who once cried in silence. That woman was gone. What stood now was a woman who had risen, a woman who could no longer be touched by the pain that once tried to break her.